Hello chess friends, and welcome to us out of Chess channel, and welcome back to our commented chess games played by computer series. So in this series we're following some great games that have been played by top engines, and today I've decided to show really beautiful sharp attacking game played by two top engines, Ethereal versus Stockfish 15 in a beautiful Benoni defense. And a couple of days ago we have covered also a beautiful tactical game in the Benoni defense in which Stockfish destroyed its opponent with the black pieces in the Benoni structure, and we're continuing today our mini series about the Benoni defense. I think if you are a Benoni defense player, then you will really like also this approach played by Stockfish 15, because here in this particular game we'll witness a beautiful bad bishop strategy, and the bad bishop strategy is really an important strategic element that you have to recognize in your own games. The bad bishop strategy is this: whenever your opponent has a bad bishop on the board, this bishop is supposed to be blocked out by its own pawn structure. So if you have maybe a light square bishop like this, you see a bad bishop would be if you have many pawns on light squares, then of course this bishop cannot move, and then it's really a bad piece all over the board. Whenever you sense that your opponent has such a bishop, then your strategic goal is to trade off every piece off the board, every minor piece. So you want to maybe give up your knight for your opponent's knight, and then leave him simply with this bad bishop and go into a favorable endgame where he has this really bad piece. So a similar thing like this will happen, but the cool part about the Stockfish game here is that Stockfish will apply the bad bishop strategy in an early stage of the game. So from move 10 or something we'll see the bad bishop strategy by Stockfish 15. So it's, in my opinion, here really a beautiful tactical game, but also an instructive strategic game here played by the fish. So let's see now how Stockfish played a beautiful bad bishop strategy. So here d4 was played by Ethereal. We have knight to f6, c4, we have c5. After d5 we have now the Benoni defense, and okay, here we have g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, e4, d6, pretty standard theory. So we have now bishop to e2, kingside castling, and now already a very aggressive method here by Ethereal with the move g4. I think many of us would start immediately to sweat when your opponent attacks you like this with this early flank attack. It is perfectly fine, nothing wrong with this approach of Ethereal. So far I really love this opening because it's really a wild opening, it's an attacking opening, it's a tactical opening. Then that's of course what we also want to see in top engine games. So here in continuation, e6. There is a rule in chess which says when your opponent is attacking you on the flanks, then you should counter play in the center of the board. So this idea is perfectly fine, because now you see the white lost a couple of tempi, lost really time in order to attack you. Now we're trying to break and enter here on the e file. We're trying then to open the e file because the king is simply stuck in the center of the board. So here we have g5, knight to e8, we have knight to f3, e takes d5, and after c takes d5, now the bad bishop strategy starts. So as I said, we're now in the move 10, and here already a beautiful, brilliant strategic move played by Stockfish 15. Stockfish trades up the bishop for the knight here on c3, and that move I really liked, because usually you should not really give up your powerful dark square bishop against your opponent's knight, because you can face of course many dark square problems. But the cool part about this setup here for black is that actually this bishop is now blocked out by its own pawn. So you see, if you take here like Ethereal did, of course, b takes c3, the bishop is basically out of game. So it's simply blocked out by its own pawns here on this diagonal. If the bishop comes maybe to f4, then the only attacking square that this bishop has is of course the d6 backward pawn sort of, but it's very hard to make progress around the square d6 even if you play something like bishop to f4. I'm not seeing good ways how you should include your bishop into the attack. You cannot play bishop to e5. You would love of course to play bishop to e5 and then maybe line up here that this bishop on this diagonal and maybe start a flank attack with h4 h5, and then you could have a decent chance with your dark square bishop. But so far the dark square bishop is really a messed up piece. Even if you include it here on this diagonal, it's still blocked out here. We can play sort of a blockade idea, b6 c5 d6 setup. So again, the bishop is out of game. So you see, now Stockfish realizes here, Stockfish calculates, of course it's not realizing, but Stockfish sees now that here the bishop on c1 is simply a bad piece. And as I said in the beginning of the video, now the strategic goal is to go simply trade off more pieces. We want to maybe have a position where we have a knight and maybe a possible endgame against your opponent's bad bishop on c1. It's not so hard, I think, to realize this bad bishop strategy, but you have to recognize it. That's, I think, the most important thing. When you recognize it, then it's much easier to play the game now from black's perspective. So in the continuation, bishop to h3, this move makes sense because we have to notice also a different thing. Many weaknesses are already here, so even if white castles now on the queen side, then it's still a messed up position because we can easily attack the queen side by moves like queen to a5, maybe with some ideas of knight to d7, knight to b6, attacking maybe the c4 weakness. So white has now trouble where to castle. Kingside castling is not an opportunity anymore, and if bishop to f1 happens, then we simply trade it off. And I think still, even if white king moves up here towards the king side, still it's not solved. The position is not solved because then of course you can face many light score problems in front of the king. So the problem, I think, in this position for white is actually the endangered king now in the center of the board. So in the continuation, after move bishop to h3, now Ethereal played knight to h4. We have knight to g7, controlling also the f5 square. We have now queen to d3, and now queen to d7, also played by Stockfish. So here in the continuation, we have queen to f3, and now knight to a6. And Stockfish is preparing now an easy idea, I think. Stockfish is preparing moves like rook to e8, then rook to e7, rook from a to e8, and building a beautiful battery, and here trying to attack, of course, the bishop on e2. So in the continuation, we have now a4. So here Ethereal is not allowing maybe the queen to come into the game. If the queen comes maybe to a4, then it can come to b3, c2, where it could be very dangerous. So in the continuation, now comes this idea: rook to e8. We have rook to g1, and now rook to e7. Stockfish is preparing this beautiful battery on the e file. So here Ethereal plays, I think, the only defensive move. If you stay too long in the with the king in the center of the board, then you're getting destroyed for sure. Now the king is at least secured for a while. At least it can hide behind this pawn structure, and it's quite difficult also for black to attack now the king in the center, although the king is in the center. But I'm not seeing also here so far good attacking opportunities for black, where to attack, how to make progress against the king. So far we have to stuck onto our main strategic goal, as I said, playing the bad bishop strategy. So far we cannot really just play aggressively against the king. It's not possible, but we can still rely on our bad bishop strategy. So here the continuation, we have knight to h5, we have king to c2, knight to c7. Now Stockfish is preparing also some ideas of a6 b5. a6 b5 could be very interesting, even if you maybe sacrifice one pawn or something, but at least you could open maybe the c file, b file. At least you can maybe try at your attack against your opponent's king. So we have now bishop to d2, and look at this, how bad really this bishop is. As we said, we have here several dark problems here in front of the king, but it's so hard to attack them. It's really not easy here for white to play the game. So we have here now rook to e8, to bishop to d3, knight to a8, and now queen to d1, here played by Ethereal. If you play something like a5 here, if you maybe not allow your opponent to jump here with the knight on b6, that was of course here a Stockfish goal, maybe to play knight to b6 and then attack the pawn on a4. Actually, this is not good because the position can be broken with the move b6. And now if you play something like a takes b6, then we can play knight to b6. And look at this, what is the actual goal here of blacks in this position. This wasn't played in the game, but I wanted to show you how really tactically rich this position already is. For instance, if you play something like rook to a5, you're trying maybe to include the rook into the game, then we can play queen to c8, keeping now the position like this, but trying of course to simply improve our minor piece position. Now the main idea, I think, here in this position is this one: knight takes c4, followed with rook to e4. Look at this, you play something like maybe queen to h1. I just played a bad move, but I wanted to show you the tactical shot that actually is possible here in this position. Knight to c4, bishop to c4, and now we play rook to e4. The knight is here also on the 4th rank, so this could be a bad game here for white. White lost a pawn now, a very important pawn on c4, and this is a messed up position. So as I said, after move knight to a8, a5 seemed really risky to me, because okay, you are preventing maybe the move knight to b6, but at least I think you should keep your progress here. You should keep at least the b5 very firm here, because as we said in the beginning, also a6 b5 could be a strategic goal in order for black, in order to make progress here on the queen side. So as we said, that's why queen to d1 here. Ethereal didn't touch anything, simply left the position on the queen side like this. But now the knight is coming to b6, so you cannot protect everything. That's what I liked about this game also by Stockfish. Stockfish really search for improvements, search for new ideas how to make progress really in this tough position. So in the continuation, f3, because as we said, the main goal was knight takes c4, followed with rook to e4. That's now not possible, because after f3, of course, knight to c4 is never an opportunity, because you cannot then play rook to e4. The pawn is taking the square very easily. So that's, I think, a good move here by Ethereal, a really nice defensive move. So here in the continuation, knight to g7, we have a queen to b3, and as we said, what was our bad bishop strategy? We have said we can live with our position when we have maybe a knight versus this bad bishop on d2. So that's why Stockfish played really on this normal idea, just to trade off more pieces. Knight to f5, knight to f5, bishop to f5, and I think mission accomplished. We will trade off even this one, and now we'll simply continue with the good knight against this bad bishop on b2, d2. So really beautiful strategic play here by Stockfish 15. So we have now bishop to f4, and now comes a brilliant move a6, and this move is really wild because it prepares something. As I said, in one particular moment we had this tactical shot possibility on knight to c4, so this was our main goal. But in the continuation of the game also, this c4 is a little bit vulnerable here, because we can really sense there's something going on around the square. The bishop is protecting the square, c4, the knight is aiming here on c4. We can play b5, which is also attacking the square c4, so it becomes now really a tough battle for this very important square. So we have now bishop to f5. Let's see now what happens. For instance, if white makes progress here on the king side, I was curious what would happen. White can also probably attack maybe the position with h5 for h5, maybe trying to open now the h file, include maybe somehow the queen into the game, and maybe deliver even checkmate on the h file. But actually after h4, this is simply too slow, because now there is this tactical shot. As we said, queen to d bishop to d3, queen to d3, and look at this now, knight to c4 is actually winning the game here for black. Really wild stuff. For instance, you can play queen to c4 or king to c4. Let's see now what happens if you take with the queen to c4, then b5, a takes b5, a takes b5. The problem is now you cannot play queen to d3 because you get the fork on the c4. So far this is not possible. And look at this, you don't have good squares. You cannot go into the e file because the rook is covering this square. So that's why you have to play a weird move like queen to f1. But now comes rook to e2. This is very important. We're simply not allowing the king to escape, and the huge threat is now of course the beautiful c4 move. You can maybe just prolong the game. Let's see now, h5, c4, you just play king to b4. Now again a beautiful check, and now after a couple of checks you get even checkmated. So this was the actual tactical goal. So as I said, after move h4, knight bishop to d3, queen to d3, and now knight takes c4. This would be the stunner of the game if of course Ethereal would play the game like this. Let's see what happens if you take with the king. Nothing dramatically changed because we can play now b5. The problem is now if you go king to b3, again you get c4 the fork. If you take of course here with the pawn, then you get queen to b5, and the game is over. You get checkmated here in the center of the board. Really wild tactics. So as I said, after move bishop to f5 was played by Ethereal. Here Ethereal didn't allow that black takes out the bishop on d3. Then we saw the queen gets decoyed towards the square d3, and then there are several tactical threats around c4. So that's why bishop to f5, queen to f5, and finally the bishop took now the pawn on d6. But again, it's not working because here Stockfish played a beautiful again move, rook to e2, again not allowing this king to escape, and again not allowing the king to breathe here. Here in the continuation, Ethereal took also another pawn, but now comes again the beautiful tactical shot, knight takes c4. Now we have king to c4, and now rook to b2. This is a beautiful preparation now to play again Here the move b5. In the continuation, we have now bishop to d6 here. Ethereal try to get out of this mess, but let's see now, even if you try maybe to compete with this rook on the b file, you get still b5, a takes b5, a takes b5. You have to step back, queen to f4. Look at this, these pieces are just dancing. Now we're playing here, you can play here queen to c4, and it's again a beautiful checkmate. So this is not working. So after move rook to b2, as we said, bishop to d6 was played by Ethereal. We have now queen to d7 attacking now the bishop. Here in the continuation we have rook to b1, but again the same motif, b5, a takes b5. We have even rook to c8, deflecting really again the king towards the center. We have now king to d3. If you play here queen a takes b5, then of course queen to b5 is going to happen, so it's simply not working. So after move king to d3 was played by Ethereal. We have a rook to a2, we have rook to e1, and now finally queen to d6. Nothing was possible anymore for Ethereal. Even if you step back here with the bishop to g3, if you try to escape, then it's simply not working. You get queen to d5, everything is messed up. You just play king to e3. Now this rook is coming into the game, and it's again game over. Really wild stuff. So after move rook to e1, as we said, Stockfish took the bishop on d6. We have c4, a takes b5. We have to take now with the rook to b5 is must move. If you take, of course, here with the pawn, then you have this isolated pawn, so it's then game over. So that's why you have to take with the rook, keeping at least the pawn structure compact now in the center of the board. But now rook to f2, Stockfish continues to pressure against this weakness on f3. The main issue is of course the king in the center position here of white. Although white has two pawns more in the position, but the endangered king is bothering here white in the continuation of the game. The king is simply naked now in the center of the board. So we have rook to e4, h6, h4. We have rook to a8, including now the rook into the game. We're trying to deliver some annoying checks on the third, maybe even on the fourth rank. We have now king to c3, h takes g5, h takes g5, and now the queen is coming into the game. We're trying also an annoying check here with rook to f3. So we have, that's why rook to e3, queen to f4, attacking now the rook, queen to d3, and it seems so that everything is defended here by Ethereal. You see, Ethereal played the only moves that were possible in order to stay in the game. But now, of course, a rook to a3, a rook to b3, you have to cover. A rook takes b3, king to b3, and actually in this position, Ethereal even resigned. So what is the actual problem here? The problem is now that you get this annoying check, and whatever you do, if you take here to go here to a3, then we play sort of a Zugzwang motif, those zigzag motif here with queen to a5, king to b3, and now you just play rook to a2, and there's no counterplay against this type of ideas. So really lost game here. You can play maybe one check, but here after king to h7 you don't have any more checks, and there's no defense anymore against this move rook to or queen to a3. So let's go back. After move queen to b8, you could maybe play here king to c3, but then you get checkmated immediately with queen to b2. So again, the endangered king here position is simply too much to handle here for white. Black is playing really beautiful checkmate pattern around the king, so it was simply game over. So as we said, after a move king to b3 in this position, Ethereal resigned. So really wild game, really immortal game it was. Again, a beautiful king hunt by Stockfish 15. I really liked this approach to play this bad bishop strategy. When the pawn came to g5, the bishop on c1 was blocked out. Stockfish noticed that, gave up the bishop for a knight, doubled up the pawn structure, and kept, I think, really a solid game. Traded off more pieces, and it was then an easy win here for the fish. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the Benoni structure for sure. If you want to see more about the Benoni, check out our Benoni series here with some other games that we have covered in this beautiful opening. And if you want to see some other Stockfish 15 and some other top engine games, check out our Common Chess Games Played by Computer series. Here's also the link, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.